It is the 15th of the 8th, 2025. The time is 10 minutes past 8. It is Friday. That means only one thing. It's your Friday show where we go long, 30 to 60 minutes, talking about all things Formula One. This is going to be very Sir Lewis Hamilton centric because that's where the news takes us, isn't it? Safak, Michael, Jomo, James, Pete is going to get techie, I'm telling you. We'll talk about Chris Harris and his reaction to the Sir Lewis Hamilton non-alcoholic tequila advert. It's techier than techie things over here. So too, we'll talk about James Allen, who's also chimed in on Sir Lewis Hamilton. Close your ears, Sir Lewis Hamilton fans, because we're going to go rogue. For the longest time, I've been talking about the Lewis Hamilton circumstance, the gradient of the hill up which he will need to climb as 7-time champion, first round Hall of Fame, Mount Rushmore of Formula One. But yeah, and still the gradient of the hill up which he will need to climb in order to win not his 8th but his first for Scuderia Ferrari is one of these now, chat. Of course, at the altar of age, Father Time is undefeated, undisputed, always has been, pound for pound, has never lost a round. But they said, didn't they, in February of last year, oh, look at, of this year even, oh, look at Sir Lewis Hamilton in front of the Ferrari, the F40. Oh, look at how brilliant that is. Hype precedes downfall, sometimes not all the time. We'll talk about all of it because it's going to get techie than techie things. In the first instance, however, I wanna point your gaze to something that's quite pertinent. We talked about McLaren yesterday, didn't we? Zach Brown doing all of the bloody UNICEF David Brent US office type thing. He's read every managerial book ever, right? But this feels a bit F1 snowflakey for me. However, James Allen on the JA on F1 podcast had something to say that there's a reason why Zach Brown has to treat both Lando Norris and OJP with kid gloves. Roll the clip.
Of laps to make things work, and I was a little bit surprised with that lunge that he made. It's not really a sort of thing Piastri does. If you look at the lap before, he actually took the line into that corner, even though he wasn't making a pass. He took the line into the corner to learn exactly what the grip level was towards the apex for the tight line, because he wanted to know what it would feel like when he actually launched it down there. And I thought that's classic Piastri. He's thinking this through. He's a very, very cerebral racer. But then it was slightly surprising that he made that sort of, as you say, almost hit his teammate and sort of locked up. So clearly had a bit of frustration at that point that it had worked out the way it had. But I think...
Let me pause there, alluding in the first stanza to the god tier level of forensic car placement that so characterised OJP's season. Touche. No kidding, Sherlock. He's not been bad, right? Miami, as your example, the overtake around on Maximilian Verstappen, the overtake on Sir Lewis, the overtakes on Charles and Lando Norris last year at Baku and the Monza Italian Grand Prix respectively. He's not been too bad, and that's why so many people are betting their house on OJP to win the championship. But what's next from James Allen is the most pertinent point, the reason why Zach Brown and Andrea Stella are potentially going overkill as far as managing the stakeholders of Lando and OJP.
There's no question we're going to be in this situation now. We've got 10 rounds remaining in this championship, and one of them is going to be world champion. But what that means is one of them is going to lose out in a team of equals, in a team where the two drivers are treated equally. And I think the risk for McLaren, and Zach Brown saying, oh, we believe the benefits of racing this way far outweigh the consequences, despite the fact that we know incidents can happen. But what McLaren's calculation has to be is that if they aren't meticulous and they aren't careful, the consequences of one of them losing will be that it might motivate them to look elsewhere. At the moment, people can't imagine a world in which Piastri and Norris are not your two drivers for McLaren for the foreseeable future. But as we've been talking about already on this podcast, Max Verstappen is going to be on the move almost certainly 12 months from now. Lewis Hamilton, we'll come on to talk about in a moment. Who knows what's going to happen with him and Ferrari, and that doesn't feel like a long-term solution. There are places on the grid for the future, and whichever driver's on the wrong side of things this year at McLaren, if there's any feeling that the team had a part to play in that, they will be starting to eye those options. So
unbelievable levels of race IQ from James Allen there. There will be movement. It's not quite silly season yet, but it will be this time next year when Max Verstappen pervades his circumstance. Maybe he leaves from Red Bull and goes to Aston or Mercedes? What happens then with George? Does he go over to Red Bull? Does he end up at Aston Martin? Who knows? But then what does Oscar do if indeed he loses the championship? We know he's always trigger happy. We saw at Alpine, he will do what's best for his own interest under the stewardship of Mark Webber, who failed to do the same thing as far as his own career was concerned. It gets techier though. Should we talk about some Sir Lewis? I don't even want to come out and criticise Sir Lewis because they will say it is biased. What we will never do ever on this channel is sacrifice truth or objectivity at the altar of partisanship or any other cognitive dissonance worthy of the moniker. Not recency, nor confirmation bias, nor partisanship. These are the comments of James Allen, God tier F1 commentator and come broadcaster. Here's what he said about Sir Lewis Hamilton in conjunction with Dutch journo Ronald Voording. Roll the clip.
That I never quite believed the hype, and I think the hype that was created over the winter is quite a significant part of the issue now, because the hype was so massive that, okay, Ferrari is going to fight for the world title, which I never believed because I always thought McLaren would be the benchmark. And then the second part of the hype was, oh, we've got the 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton coming in. He's going to fight for the title, which also I never believed because I think people really underestimated Charles Leclerc and his development in the last couple of years. So I think that's also part of the story, the massive hype that was created in January, February, and then it kind of backfires now towards the summer if it doesn't work out as expected.
It is, per Ronald Voording, the disconnect between expectations and results. Lewis has been struggling. This is his longest run in his F1 career without a podium. You can't turn your eyes away from those stats lest you wish to be deemed an F1 abbot of unreason. This is his worst period. Now, maybe you want to argue that, of course, it would be his worst period. He's 40 years old. He's at Scuderia Ferrari. It's a brand new team. He's got to acclimatise to their processes, their car, their engine braking, their brake disc, that it's all brand new. What would you expect? Well, it didn't take himself so long in 2013 moving over to Mercedes. Different circumstance, some will say, not like for like. But I am concerned as a Sir Lewis Hamilton fan, especially when you hear James Allen and Ronald Voording talking this way, that their expectation results disconnect won't serve Sir Lewis. It won't help him as he goes into 2026. Now we'll come on to the bloody the notes and documents that he's been sending Scuderia Ferrari C-suite exec level bods with a view to influence and impact the way in which the SF25 is designed, or 26 is designed next year. We'll come on to that shortly, but between now and then I want you to listen to James Allen again. He replays a conversation, an interview that he had with Frederick Vasseur, team principal of the red car with a yellow badge and black prancing horse atop. And this was early, before Lewis Hamilton even joined Ferrari. Listen to what he says. Please continue.
You won championships with him back in the day in his junior career when he was 21 years old. He's going to be 40 in January. And it can go one of two ways with champions when they get the other side of their 40th birthday. They can either maintain peak levels, as we see to some extent Alonso today is very, very competitive, or it can be less competitive beyond 40. Are you confident he'll be just as competitive beyond 40?
Yeah, for me, I'm more than confident, because that the difference is the motivation. For sure that when you are 40, or if you are not in a positive environment, you don't have the feeling that you can win, that you can, it's very difficult to keep the motivation that after years and years and years. I'm really convinced that Lewis wants to play a central role into the game with us, and no doubt that he will be mega motivated.
So that's fascinating to go back and listen to that. That was June of 2024, Ronald. Vasseur there saying that if you're 40 and you're not in a positive environment and you don't have the feeling that you can win, it's very easy to lose the motivation, basically. Clearly, the first part of his answer there about that sort of bringing the knowledge is what you were talking about earlier. But the motivation question is the big one here, isn't it?
Yeah.
How, ladies and gentlemen, then can Lewis Hamilton maintain motivation when he's fighting so many different fires concurrently? that it is the handling dynamic of the car. Understeer through snap oversteer doesn't give him the confidence through the medium to high speed turns that he so demands, that he so needs to optimise for his performance on track. What about the team that he says it doesn't make sense the way they work, the way they set up the Canadian for the Canadian Grand Prix? What about the brakes? What about the discs and the pads that led to the lock-up in FP1 a couple of races ago? There are so many plates for which Sir Lewis Hamilton needs to spin, none of which can be allowed to fall and crack. It is difficult. Therefore, difficult is an understatement. And Frederick Vasseur, in his interview, his own words, explains why. When you're 40 years old, James Allen expounds, your career can go one of two ways. Sometimes you carry on, crack on, are able, even if I can get my words out, to unlock a new level of performance. A la Fernando Alonso. I know it's Stroll in the other car, but Fernando's still been operating at a high-ish level, normalised for the Aston Martin car performance. But when you compare Lewis to Charles, I mean, already the gap in the championship is material. 14 races in. Now maybe that turns around over the prevailing 10, but who's to say? It's going to get techie. And then you get these guys. I'm going to play you some more clips again. I think this is Chris Harris on. Okay, we'll do the docs for now. Here's what's been going on, and this is important. Lewis Hamilton has a lot of articles over the past 24 hours, not excluding Bernie Ecclestone's comments on Sir Lewis Hamilton, have been talking around his need to make sure that the SF26 iteration of the Ferrari next year speaks to him, speaks to his handling dynamic, the way he wants the car to be managed. Because but for that now, it is over for Sir Lewis Hamilton. And that, ladies and gentlemen, as a Sir Lewis Hamilton fan, would be a shame. I would love to see Lewis win his 8th, his first for Scuderia Ferrari. A rising Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton tied floats or F1 boats. And Lewis, a couple of weeks ago, it became clear that he was sending out documents, having conversations with John Elkann and the C-suite exec level bods at Ferrari with a view to get his not insubstantial arms around the design philosophy of the SF26 to ensure that this doesn't happen again. That they don't end up with a car tinkering with the suspension at the front and then having a car that's too temperamental all over the shop, one that they can't run low enough to the ground because it gets techie as far as excessive plank wear. DNF risk does one of these. Can't afford for that to happen again. The risks, the stakes even, are far too high for Sir Lewis. You can hear the naysayers saying that, well, I told you he was a fast car merchant. I told you that chap was too old. I told you that as soon as you put a strong, hungry lion in that other car, like, I don't know, a Charles or a George, then all of a sudden, Lewis is like Samson when you cut his hair off. He has no strength. He loses his speed advantage. Now, I don't believe in all that. I can't believe in all that because I saw Lewis Hamilton in his peak at his prime when he was a young, fire-breathing dragon. But again, per the conversation with Shez yesterday, it is becoming an orgy of an evidence as far as the naysayers and their arguments, exhibit A, B and C. And that's why, per Planet F1 today, Sir Lewis Hamilton has submitted a number of requests for Project 678. That's the project name of the SF26, next year's iteration of Ferrari car. He seeks a couple different things. As far as the brakes, He doesn't like the way they feel. They're more immediate in the Ferrari. It's Brembo's as opposed to carbon industry. Doesn't like it. Doesn't like the engine braking, the mode, nor the modularity of it. Again, it's very different to everything that he'd experienced in his Mercedes hitherto, where he won all of his bloody championships bar one. So too, as far as the handling dynamics, snap oversteer isn't something that Lewis Hamilton is ever going to love. And understeer also. Now they've been tinkering around with the front end to make it more on the nose, but yet and still the car is understeery when Lewis Hamilton and the drivers need that the least. He's talked about the way that they work, that it's not good, that it's not productive, nor is it progressive, that they need to be less siloed, more joined up, more collaborative, that the communication over the radio needs to be first, no, best in class, whereas season to date, it's been nothing if not rubbish. Do you know what I mean? They give them too much information, and then the next lap, it's not enough. It is not Goldilocks on the Three Bears. It's either too hot or too cold, never just right as far as Ferrari and their communication. He's looking to hire new god tier minds because these lot aren't good enough. They're not designing the car and their low level decision making is poor. He's looking to circle the wagons too as far as the key decision makers at Ferrari, the good racing minds, away, distance them away from the politics of an Elkan and a bloody Stellantis. That's what Jean Todt did back in the day. It's why Lewis is looking desperately to get in front, because for the avoidance of doubt, next year could potentially be his last chance. That's why he's getting these bloody documents out. And so too, I rate it. I think Lewis has to. It's time now. Do you know what I mean? It's all cards on the table time now, and it is go time. If it doesn't work now, it never will. And potentially that might be Lewis's lot as far as Formula One is concerned. Of course, he's more accustomed to the Mercedes, both the setup and the car dynamic. But now, I mean, last chance saloon for Sir Lewis Hamilton. And Chris Harris on cars, by the way. They've been talking about this tequila. Remember, a couple of weekends back, it was the bloody 8th of the 8th, 2025. There was this big announcement due, wasn't there? And everybody thought it might be something pertaining to F1 or driving or Ferrari or the championship. Remember, this was on the back of a very disappointing weekend where Sir Lewis said that, listen, it's me every time. It's not good enough. Just isn't good enough. Maybe it's me that they need to take out. Maybe Ferrari need to put a new driver in the car. So the speculation went like this. It did one of these. It exploded. 2026 Bono to Ferrari. I don't hate it, Andrew. It's techie. The speculation around the announcement was one of these. Maybe Lewis is going to call it a day. Maybe Father Time at 40 years old is undefeated, undisputed. But it turned out that it was an announcement all around his latest and greatest sponsorship deal. Putting his name again to he already had a non-alcoholic tequila, but a new flavour of it, Almabe, he calls it. Now, this is Chris Harris on cars. You guys know that I like to watch a bit of Chris Harris. He's a driver, a racing guy, races at Le Mans, etc. And he's a more sound car guy as far as the way that he thinks and the way that he ingests his Formula One and motorsport more broadly, a Le Mans guy, etc. You will never meet. Here's what Chris Harris and his co-host had to say about this Almabe production. Please continue.
A bit under that heading, if you go back to when they launched this thing in 2023, is it Almave? Who knows?
It's Almave.
So it was launched late 23. Tequila has been Lewis Hamilton's drink of choice, but he wanted an alternative that allowed him to live a busy life without restraint.
I don't drink.
He quickly realised there was a gap in the market. I bet he bloody did. Rather than sitting there thinking, I spent 2 years in a dogshit Mercedes after losing at Abu Dhabi, rather than thinking about how do I make my Mercedes less porpoisey and less ride height sensitive, and when am I going to win a race again? No, I looked at a gap in the tequila market. It's bobbins.
It is indeed bobbins, sir. Now, here's why this is important, because I trust these guys. These guys are proper patriot Brits as far as their motoring, their very unique brand of motoring journalism. You'll hear them on this podcast say, I want Lewis to win because he's a Brit. He's the best driver that I've ever seen, and he's a Brit. He's Lewis Hamilton and he is a Brit. They always punctuate it because they are unashamedly British bias centric. Here is them talking though with truth overlaid about the bloody Almabe sponsorship. Now, this is why this is important for me personally. I've been speaking about Sir Lewis Hamilton for the longest time, encouraging him to focus, as he said he would do, only on racing. Said a couple of weeks ago that he doesn't want to have a relationship because he wants to maximise for his F1 opportunity. That stuff can wait till afterwards, and that's admirable. Of course it is. Lewis Hamilton has always been a focused F1 driver, nothing if not. However, when I see him go to the Met Gala, I ask a question to which Sir Lewis Hamilton fan stands extremist and fundamentally say, what are you talking about, Cameron? He's got to have a life outside of Formula One. You know the Toto Wolff story already. that if you don't allow Lewis Hamilton to be Lewis Hamilton, they don't expect him to drive like Lewis Hamilton when he gets inside the car. And that sounds all nice. It's a brilliant soundbite and it looks nice on paper. But we understand that in F1, sometimes it takes an unprecedented level of commitment. In 2018, Lewis Hamilton could afford to go to his sponsorship events and his Met Gala and unveil all the shops and bloody whatever else he wanted to do, because the natural talent deficit that the others fell foul of was that substantial. The quantum and delta that Lewis Hamilton had in his back pocket over a Seb Vettel or anybody else competing at the time was that material. Now at the ripe old age, lest we forget that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, but the most adaptable to change and therefore changing circumstances. Lewis at 40 is a very different animal from Lewis at 35. For F1 is a young man's game, is now and always has been, is now more than ever, is the honest truth. This isn't 57 and Farina, Fangio. This isn't 50 and Farina. This isn't 1966 and Jack Brabham. This is 2025. This is Max Verstappen's era and Charles Leclerc shortly thereafter, Lando Norris, all of whom, as far as their age, have the two to start with. They're 24, 25, 26, 27 years old. F1 is a young man's game. I don't care who wants to point at Tom Brady or LeBron as the exceptions that prove the bloody rule to say that Lewis Hamilton can go another 500 years. That is nonsense. I can't engage it. No, I won't indulge it. Abbots of Unreason can do one of these at the altar of bias and confirmation bias and recency bias if indeed they want to, but I can't do that on here. I want my opinions to stand up to the light of truth. They have to, for you guys will call me out on my bull feathers here. Do you know what I mean? But I say all that to say this. Shez and Baxter they've been killing me. Every time we do a shakedown, it's like, Cameron, Lewis should get in the sim. Or today on the WhatsApp group, it's been, Cameron, why isn't Lewis in the sim? Today, though, Chris Harris and his guys, Manish Pandey, exec producer of Senna the documentary, or some involvement. Maybe I've misspoke there, but Manish Pandey was directly involved in the Senna documentary. Here's what these guys have to say about Lewis Hamilton and this non-alcoholic tequila announcement. Roll the clip.
So a very quick answer to this. I shared with you guys an article. I don't know if you read it. It's Nigel Roebuck, again, going back to Formula One. It was in 1990. It was Nigel Mansell trying to make a decision about what he was going to do in 1991. And as you know, I'm not such a big Nigel fan, but I have to say I utterly admired this. He was given a contract to stay at Ferrari for 1991, which would have just blown all other contracts away in terms of how much money he would have got. He said, you know what? No, I've earned enough money. I'm only staying in Formula One for one reason and one reason alone, and that is to become world champion. So if I go to a team next year, it's got to convince me that I can win the world championship. And Williams did it. He went back to Williams. They had a fantastic package. He took a huge pay cut to do it, but he did it. And 2 years later, he was world champion. I think that's a good answer to Almave. Lewis is worth hundreds of millions of pounds. And I can absolutely see that after motor racing, he's going to be an absolute brand king. And that is the difference between him and Beckham. Beckham no longer plays football. This is what David Beckham does. He publicizes whether it's his football team, the MLS, the World Cup, or
you
whatever.
Go, he's great. Yeah, great.
That's great. But he is retired from football. And I just think, Lewis, if you can spend 15 minutes working on some aero fix or try to help your guys find it, do it. Look for every decimal point now, because, you don't have long in Formula One. Focus totally on Formula One right now. That's it. Just focus on Formula One. 23 hours, 59 minutes a day. Dream about Formula One, because if you win an 8th title, that puts you somewhere no one else has ever been, and you still have a chance to do it.
Mate, the dude just took all of the words out of my mouth. They've been laughing at me for the longest time saying I'm anti-Sir Lewis when I am not. I would love for that dude to win another championship. I would love to live and breathe unprecedented circumstances as far as his F1 accolades. Nobody's not going to tell me any different. I don't care what the naysayers and the abbots of Unreason want to say. But that dude's talking the truth. Surely, Lewis, do what you say you're going to do, eh? You said you were going to live and breathe Formula One. When you were asked about all your altruistic philanthropic activities at the start of the season, whether you can balance those in conjunction with giving your best efforts and endeavours to winning your first for Ferrari, the red car with a yellow badge and a black prancing Corsa top, whether you could do both of those things. You said you were going to be exclusively focused on F1 and Ferrari, making sure the car's fit for purpose where it needs to be in order to bring back silverware of the drivers championship variety to Maranello and Fiorano. And then the next day we see that chap at the Met Gala. Now maybe these two things can exist in the same space, maybe, but I would contend at the ripe old age of 40 that sometimes it's not the strongest of the species that survive. To reiterate the point, it's the most adaptable to change. Lewis Hamilton at 40 years old has to be a very different entity from the chap that Sir Lewis Hamilton was at 35. This is not Fermat's last theorem trying to solve for it. This is basic. This is counting. Now, Philippe, a lot of people say, what about Alonso? Well, is Alonso beating his teammate? The last that I checked, he was gapping a Lance Stroll. Is Lance Stroll anywhere near the entity that modern day Jean Alesi Charles Leclerc is? Absolutely flipping not. But you can only beat the other dude in the car now to a greater or less extent. Go on, and this is the kicker, because Chris Harris is one of the go-TS for the avoidance of doubt. All F1 journos and motoring journos are created equal, but some, mention no names, Chris Harris, are created more equal than others. Let's have a listen to what Chris Harris has to say.
Like the others, I'm a massive Lewis fan, but I'm becoming less of a Lewis fan because I'm really struggling with. I don't care about the struggles of getting old and not winning. That doesn't matter to me at all. But there's too much noise outside of the core skills of driving a racing car. That doesn't mean you have to win, but just be true to being a racer. I think of Lewis as that kid that was in a go-kart when he was young and thrashing people. I think of Lewis the fighter. I think Lewis sticking it to Alonso in that first year. Lewis that talked about driving. I'm just, this came up in that film with Max a bit. I just want racers. I just think there's too much encouragement for these young men. Lewis is now not a young man, to opine on shit that I'm not interested in. I don't want to hear about, frankly. And alcohol-free tequila can really go fuck itself. I'm not interested. I'm afraid, like the others, I'm a massive.
I know, and I'm with him, chat. I'm with him. I'm not interested. Maybe that's me being too die-hard an F1 fan. Maybe it's 2025 and I need to evolve and move with the times. Maybe I'm too Jim Clark and not enough Lando Norris. Maybe social media has come to take over. Maybe it's the Drive to Survive era. Maybe, just maybe. But I don't, honestly, I don't subscribe to it. I cannot subscribe to it. For those of you who say Lance Stroll is equal on points to Fernando Alonso. Maybe I need to revise that, or maybe we need to see where they are at the end of the season. At least he's not getting gapped by Lance Stroll, but again, he's a very different driver to the one that is Charles Leclerc, circa 40 points down the road, 42 points down the road from Sir Lewis. At least Alonso is not behind, but I don't know. Lewis will be back, says Neil. Mate, houseway. But you're using what logic? I don't know, I want to subscribe to your thesis, Neil, but I just can't, at this juncture, given the most recent first-hand evidence, he's going to need for those documents to work right. He's going to need to institute for a lot of change. He will need to engineer that car around his very specific set of skills as a fire-breathing F1 peddler. Going to need to remember who he is, right? Going to need to put behind him all the nonsense that's this year. He's going to need to have confidence in himself and stop talking about himself in a way that's overly self-deprecating. I'd love to see an F1 lesson, says Joe May. An F1 lesson, life plan for drivers by pundits, wake up sim, rewatch race, gym sim, promotion sim. I mean, Nico Rosberg's, he's the blueprint, is he not, Joe May, for overcoming a natural talent deficit? I feel like Nico Rosberg has already written it. That's why he's trying to help Lando Norris with it. But I don't know. Chat, I'm on it. I'll be honest with you. Non-alcoholic tequila. Just want to see Lewis drive a car. I tell you what, as around third base, this is interesting. I've always felt like I had a a penchant to Lewis when he first came on the scene. 2005, 6, 7, Lewis Hamilton. That was like, my God, to the moon, like, go to war with that dude. Was always a big Sir Lewis Hamilton fan. But something, like Chris Harris just said, something about modern day Sir Lewis just isn't for me. Not that I dislike the fella, but all of the extracurricular activities just isn't for me. I like my drivers to bloody drive, to talk about racing. And I was drawn, YouTube algorithm kicked something up the other day, I'll link it in the description. An interview between Lewis, a long time ago interview, I want to say anywhere between 10 and 11 years ago. Interview between Sir Lewis Hamilton then and friend of the channel Peter Windsor. For 10 minutes, all they talked about was racing. And I fell in love with Sir Lewis again. Pause. But I did fall in love with that Sir Lewis again. When was the last time that you heard Lewis not moaning about the handling dynamic, not talking about Ferrari and how they make mistakes or how they don't work, the way that they work doesn't make sense? When was the last time you heard Sir Lewis, Sir Lewis, just talk about racing and lines? Debate back and forth with Peter D. Windsor about a V line or a wide line. That's why that Maximilian Verstappen video with Chris Harris has done 4 million views. All Max is talking about there is racing. It's an insight into the mind of a driver. I would love to see Chris Harris do something similar with Sir Lewis and just have House karting racing driver Sir Lewis come to the fore. Whatever happened to that? Is that too much to ask, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury? I hope not, because I want to see that dude come back. Do you know what I mean? Yes, that's more important than personal life, says Miami. Well, I mean, it depends what you want. Listen, I wouldn't care if Lewis was just doing what Lewis was doing. I wouldn't. But he always says that he's dialed in. He's locked in, right? So how comes there's this mismatch between actions and work? I just don't know. I'm with Chris Harris, I'm not going to lie to you. As much as I want to see Lewis Hamilton win himself his first for Ferrari, as much as his 8th for himself, I just don't know. I feel like that as a reality dissipates more and more by the second. Hertz, you're a legend. We love your absolute objective thoughts. I'm trying, Hertz. I really am trying. And they will come for me because this is video. But I can't help myself. I'm a thinking shooter. I worry about Sir Lewis Hamilton going forward, not just now or next year, but his legacy and the way that people will talk about him going forward, because it's going to get techier than techie things. It will get more difficult as the dude gets older. And again, I hope that they can tinker with the couple. Why then would, as a closing thought, check this out. If you're a Scuderia Ferrari, why would you build, what's the incentive to build a car in the image of Sir Lewis Hamilton? With Charles Leclerc in the other car, 42 points down the road from Sir Lewis Hamilton, as at the time of writing. Lewis must open a cafe with non-alcoholic free drink. No, anyway, I take you. Lewis should start thinking about actual legacy, which should be about future generation. But I mean, he's doing that. That I can't criticise Lewis for, because he's got his altruistic things and STEM subjects and all that other stuff. I almost think he's doing that too much. Think about himself and his own legacy, and how he's going to be remembered when all's said and done in the weird and wacky world of Formula One. Just imagine, per Chris Harris's co-host, imagine that Lewis Hamilton can win himself an 8th championship. Unprecedented settings, statistical GOAT, first round Hall of Fame. Do you know what I mean? Mount Rushmore of F1, first round, everything. Nobody can talk to it then. You're having a GOAT conversation. It's quite easy. It's a simple one. Now that you're level with Michael, now that Max is breathing down your neck on 4, doing 3.5 or so, it's going to get techier than techie things. It's a difficult conversation. And the naysayers now, as we type, as we talk even, are building themselves exhibit A, B, and C. Fast car driver, can't be a strong teammate, etc., etc. What was one of many, per Fernando Alonso, Seb Vettel, Alain Prost, to go over to Scuderia Ferrari, Nigel Mansell, mentioned no names, to go over to Scuderia Ferrari and fail to get it right. That notwithstanding, Lewis has said personally, quite openly and explicitly, that he won't accept the fate of a Fernando Alonso, nor will he accept the fate of a Seb who went over there and couldn't do it. He wants to come out of that circumstance at Ferrari, end his tenure with at least some silverware. I would contend, Sir Lewis, that on the most recent evidence, the probability of that transpiring as an eventuality reduces more and more by the second. Oh, the humanity.